Good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time of day it is. Thanks for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. Now, for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. Now, tonight we're going to talk about no new tax breaks for millionaires. No new tax breaks for millionaires. And my guest tonight over here is Robert Harrison, and this is John Horton. And I couldn't get those two names mixed up because never mind. As you know, the show goes in two segments typically. The first segment goes for 15 minutes to half an hour, where I talk to my guests about who they are personally, so you have an idea where they're coming from when they voice their opinions and views on whatever it is we're talking about. And the second half, or a little more than that, is where we address the subject of the show, no new tax breaks for millionaires, and why that came up. So let's get started and do the bio segment first. And Joan, since you've been on the show before, why don't you model how you should answer these questions? Okay?
I'll do my best.
Joan's a fellow member of the Alliance for Democracy, and you should say a few words about that first. Will you?
Okay. I have been part of AFD since we started it in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an organization that is interested in ending corporate dominance in our culture and in our social institutions and of our political system and economic system in particular, and returning democracy back to the people, which is who it's for.
Are you a bunch of socialists or communists or something?
Well, we don't really take notice at the meetings. So maybe we are, maybe we're not. We might even have capitalists in our midst.
Shh. Okay, good idea. All right, let's continue on with, if I were to ask your best friend, who is Joan, what would he or she say?
Ooh, I don't know.
He would say, Joan is what?
Somebody they've known for several decades.
You said there. You're the first person now. That's a trick question. I always have one trick question.
I'll keep that in mind.
I'll give you a different one. Joan is a groovy lady or what?
Well, there is that. I have been known to wear some tie-dye in my time. And I have a great sense of humor.
She has a great sense of humor.
And a long-standing interest in the world of Star Trek and science fiction, and political stuff. And I'm a tax accountant, among other things in my past. And
so that's what she would say, huh? She'd say all these things about you. Okay, I'm going to skip to the next
maybe
question.
so.
Going to be that kind of a night. And where were you born?
Fort Worth, Texas.
Uh-huh. When was that?
Middle of the 50s.
Anything significant about your cultural heritage worth telling the viewers about?
Probably. I was born in Texas and raised there and lived there till I was in my teenage years when I moved to California with my mom because they got divorced. And I moved to San Francisco where I lived for about 20 years until I moved up to Portland.
Oh. Why did you move to Portland?
Things that I'd sort of done everything in San Francisco, and I'd always liked Oregon and Portland. I had come up to Portland to visit friends that had moved up here, so it's beautiful.
Oh, yes.
Who wouldn't want to live here?
Yes. Don't believe her out there. We're overcrowded in Portland. How about a religious preference? Do you have one of those or not?
Sort of no. I was raised Unitarian, so I'm sort of Unitarian-minded type person.
Okay.
I'm not a member of the church, but...
How about your formal education? Did you have any of that?
Yes, college. I went to... I'm a CPA. I went to San Francisco State University where I got a degree in business administration with an accounting concentration. And I had a lot of other interesting classes during all that time too.
For example?
For history and a lot of literature and French and French language classes, and political science, and Eastern medicine and healing.
Wow, you're all over the place. You're
Well,
the
you
San
know,
Francisco hippie, huh?
when you take a lot of business classes, you kind of want to have something to counterbalance it.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends in school kept taking other business classes, and I'm like, well, that could have been more boring.
And you mentioned what you're doing in your work life. What is that you're doing? Say a few more words about
Okay.
that.
I have a business, which is all just me. I do taxes mostly and help people with their bookkeeping. And sometimes other business stuff that they need to know about. There's a fair amount of sort of counseling that goes into that too.
Of course, yes.
Money is a big issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, and
They're very afraid of it.
I bet you're good at it.
The counseling part?
Yes.
Yeah, I kind of think so. Because I try to get them over whatever it is that's really bothering them so that we can actually get on with dealing with the actual issue, which is usually getting numbers for a tax return or several, and that's not always easy to do. There's a lot of emotional baggage that goes with it.
So I kind of admire that because being a retired clinical psychologist, I have a personal interest in people's okayness and wellness and having a good feeling about their existence and so on and so forth. And
It's very important.
I'll keep going. You have a partner.
No,
You're interested in having one.
maybe the right one. I've met them.
There's our email address out there, you right partner. Call her and say, honey, I saw you and I love you.
Yeah.
How would you characterize your political persuasion? Your left, right, center, or off the chart?
Well, not off the chart, I don't think. I am distinctly left of the Democrats. I was sort of raised that way, and I just stayed that way, and the Dems have sort of moved to the right a little bit.
Yeah.
And the rights just continued to go to the right. But I was raised in a fairly politically inclined household.
And how about through the years the Republican Party? Have they moved on the political continuum since the days of Jacob Javits?
In my perspective, they have.
Yeah.
Their perspective, probably not. But from from what I see, yes. It seemed to me that in the past, the Republicans in Congress were a lot more interested in, at least achieving something rather than carrying on about how bad the Democrats are. Even though there's always that strain in both sides.
I'm tempted to mention the debate last night, but I don't want to throw up. Let's pass on that.
Or distract everybody.
Presidential debate last night. Memberships in political, social, or civic organizations. You have any memberships that would be of interest to the viewers?
Oh, well, I'm, like I said, member of AFT, although we're not really members, we're just people working together. And then I associate, because of that, with other groups like the one tonight, Tax Fairness Oregon, which is actually Jody Weiser's group about tax fairness in Oregon. And so I can't say I'm a member because I don't know what that means, but AFD works with other groups to achieve goals. We back them up and sometimes ask them to back us up.
Yeah, and I must mention now that Jody was going to be here tonight, but she had a conflict of interest or something and she couldn't be here, so we're going to fill in without you, Jody, but we'll miss you. Person or persons from the past that you liked or admired. Any names come to mind now from the top of your head? Or alive today? Anybody?
Famous people, Eleanor Roosevelt.
You admired her?
Absolutely, because she got out there and tromped around when it was unseemly for women to do that. And I can add all the suffragists from the 1800s to that for the same reason. You know, we wouldn't be here working on this stuff if it weren't for that work. Yeah. And then unfamous people, a lot of the people that I grew up around, like my parents and their friends, who basically did the same thing I'm doing. Although I don't know that they ever went on television. But they're the kind of people who helped create cable access television. When I was a kid, I don't really think we had such a thing.
Is there anyone alive now whose name you can mention?
Yes, all sorts of people.
Okay.
Like, do you want to hear them? Big long list.
No, just a couple.
I could name Ralph Nader,
Ralph
and I will
Nader.
do that. I could name Helen Caldecott. I will
Shut
do
up,
that.
Rick. Helen Caldecott, Ralph Nader.
And I even like Barbara Boxer, senator from California,
Okay.
who does get after it sometimes.
How do you say your bona fides, the bona fides, or whatever? Bona fides.
Bona fides is what I often hear.
Yeah, you
Well,
got
here
your
we
bona
call them bona fides.
Okay, okay, shall we move over here to Robert? You ready?
Yes, sure, Don.
I got a separate set of questions for you.
Oh,
because you-
I'd had all the answers to those you just gave. So
Already. I can't say Eleanor. She just said
Yeah,
that.
and when and where were you born?
I was born in Vancouver, Washington, back 1958.
And how long you been here?
Well, I grew up in Camas. Went all the way through high school, through Camas, then went to Clark Community College in Vancouver, and then transferred up to the University of Washington, where I got a degree in urban planning. After that, I came down, and it was what I called the Reagan recession at that point, so there weren't really any jobs. So I ended up being a short order cook at Reed College for a year before I got into law school.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Do you remember those days?
I do.
They make you smile, huh?
Yeah, it was okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Can I ask you your trick question now? I asked hers earlier. And
Okay, go ahead.
why were you born?
Why was I born?
Why does everyone always repeat that question?
Didn't your parents give you the talk?
No, this is a family show now. Be careful.
There were like 5 brothers and sisters, growing up in a small town, and it was the thing to do, I guess, was to have a family.
Yeah. And anything significant about your cultural or national heritage, or you're just plain American white bread?
When I was growing up, it was sort of an interesting part that my grandfather was from Norway. He was Norwegian, had a very hefty Norwegian accent, and we used to not make fun of him, but enjoy that.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And as a religious preference, is that an appropriate question for you?
Yeah, I sort of have my own religion, I guess. I call it, I'm a pathistolic. I really don't care what you think.
Say that again?
I'm a pathistolic. I really don't care what you think. I think it's fine. I think it's fine. If it makes you a better person and a better community member, I'm all for it. I probably won't be converted to your religion, so I sort of made up that word.
I'm glad you did. I should write it down. I'll watch the show later on to be sure I remember that. That's neat, yeah. And your formal education?
Formal education, University of Washington.
Yes, you mentioned that.
And then I went to law school here locally at Lewis and Clark Law School.
And what do you do to earn your keep nowadays?
I'm an attorney. I work at Harris Law Firm, which obviously is my law firm that I founded some time ago. We currently have 11 lawyers in 3 different locations. Our main office is in Hillsborough, where we have 8 lawyers and our main part of our staff. We also have an office in Bridgeport Village down in the Tigard area and Northeast Portland. And we're a general practice law firm. We do most of anything. The lawyers there really focus on 1 or 2 areas themselves, but we can cover, I call it mom and pop sort of thing.
And how long have you been doing that?
First I worked for a big law firm, and then I went to the district attorney's office in Washington County, where I prosecuted anything from misdemeanors to major felonies. I went out on my own then for a few years, and I actually went into the construction business with my in-laws for a few years. And then I thought maybe we should continue to be able to have Thanksgiving together, so I went out of that. Went back into law. I think I actually founded the current iteration of Harris Law Firm in 1997, so it's been about 14, 15 years, and we're now 11 lawyers.
And you enjoy it?
Yeah, I do. I like going to work every day.
Wonderful. That's very good. So many people are working and just to feed themselves, and that's about it. You have a partner, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, whatever.
Wife of 26 years. 26 years and 3 children, 3 daughters.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't look that old.
Well, thank you.
How old are your daughters?
Oldest is 22. She just graduated from the University of Washington herself, third generation Husky. And she took the MCAT, so she'll be applying for medical school. She did very well, so we're hopeful for that. My middle daughter goes to University of San Francisco. Joan and I were just talking about San Francisco, what a great school it is to go to. And she is in environmental science, and she is an 800-meter runner for their track team. And my youngest daughter is 15, and she's a great dancer, and she goes to Glencoe High School.
Wonderful.
Hi.
Do they like you?
I hope so. Maybe not after today.
See, he reminded me that I was going to just ask him to address the kids, and he did it. See, you reminded me of it. Yeah. And your political persuasion, can you say what you are in that vein?
Yeah, you know, my father was a Democrat, grew up in a Democratic household. My mother's a school teacher, was a Democrat forever. I'd say moderate Democrat. Some people may say too liberal, some may think I'm a conservative Democrat. But about 3-4 years ago, I changed my registration to the Independent Party of Oregon.
Independent Party. Interesting.
Yes. Interestingly enough, Joan and I are both involved in that Independent Party of Oregon, and we're sort of surprised to see each other here, but I guess you run into each other. And Joan is, my guess, is more to the left than I am, but we're both members of the same party.
And she's not as far to the left as I am either. And I'm a member of the Justice Party, the Kucinich supporter,
good.
a Nader supporter before that.
I saw Ralph Nader speak. He was very interesting.
Yeah.
Went to one of his speeches. Yeah.
Yeah. Persons from the past or alive today that you like or admired?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, anyone that is will stand up and speak truth to power, I guess, isn't. Maybe that's a cliche way of saying it, but anyone that's willing to do that, I admire.
Yeah. Sometimes cliches fit.
Sometimes there's a good reason they're cliches, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Let's just move on, take a break now, so that we have enough time to talk about the subject, because it's important enough. Let's take a break now, Mr. E. Mr. Director, please. Okay, we are back now. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about. Tonight we're talking about Measure 84, and the title of the show,
No tax breaks.
yeah, No Tax Breaks for Millionaires. All right, let's keep going here. What is Tax Fairness Oregon?
It's a group that Jody Weiser founded to promote fairness in Oregon's tax laws, the tax laws that the state of Oregon has. Fairness for all the people that pay taxes, and not having the taxes coming too much from one side or too much from the other, and also to help promote proper and fair implementation of the laws too. That's what I understand.
So she formed it because apparently the taxing in Oregon was unfair.
Yes, and it had something to do with her personal experience, which I know only a dab about from her, which was she inherited some property, a farm, I believe, and dealt with the estate tax in Oregon. I don't know when this was, it was quite a while ago, and was somewhat surprised at how little tax she had to pay on the estate, if any. And that kind of led her into this. Prior to that, she'd been a kindergarten teacher, I understand. Mm-hmm. That all happened before I ever met her. Mm-hmm. So I can't speak to that as having somebody that watched her go through that. That's just what I understand. So then she was able to create this group, Tax Fairness Oregon, and deals a lot with different tax issues as they come through. And one thing she also does is testify in Salem to the state legislature when they're making tax laws and such as that.
So her adventure earlier on got her turned on to being an activist in this regard.
Well, and making that connection between being basically a school teacher in terms of being a kindergarten teacher, and then having this windfall of inheriting a farm and having the money that came from that. Mm-hmm. She's able in her own life, I understand, to sort of see both sides and pull this together. And as opposed to so many people that pit teachers against all the rest of us. A sad concept, but still.
Measure 84.
Measure 84.
What's that about?
Measure 84 it's on the ballot in November here in Oregon. It's a statewide measure. It was put on the ballot by conservatives, led by Kevin Mannix, to repeal Oregon's estate tax at the state level. Conservatives have been working on this through the country. They've been working on this for a couple decades, I believe. And they've managed to eliminate about half of the estate taxes at the state level. They just want to eliminate the estate tax altogether. And they're working ground up, doing it state by state by state. And we went through this in Oregon several years ago, and now we're going through it again. And so our group, Alliance for Democracy and Tax Fairness Oregon, and Defend Oregon is also working on this, are against Measure 84, because to vote yes on 84 would be to say, I want to repeal the estate tax in Oregon. So we believe we need to keep the estate tax. And there's many reasons why. The biggest of which is that it adds about $100,000 a year to the Treasury of Oregon, to the general fund, most of which is used toward school and public education. So it would be a huge hit to lose that. And then there's a whole other issue embedded in the current measure that Robert can talk about, which we will get to.
Yeah.
It's a Trojan horse of a bit.
Yeah. This piece says, no on Measure 84, death tax loophole would be disastrous for Oregon. This is by you, this piece here. And death tax, what is that about?
Well, I didn't use that term.
In quotes.
I did not use that term. That is the heading that the Hillsborough Argus headline writer put on there. I refer it to as the estate or the inheritance tax. Death tax is a name. It's become sort of a pejorative in a way. And the people who are against it call it a death tax. You know, if you don't like the income tax, maybe you call it the taking money out of my pocket tax, okay?
Yes.
So by labeling it something that sounds bad, it has some effect. It's the inheritance or the estate tax in this case, and what it is. is upon death of a person, if their estate is worth X amount of dollars and they do a probate, or they don't do a probate, in any event, if there's going to be a tax levied on that, on the value of the estate, the gross value of the estate. Joan can really speak to this because she's a CPA and she's probably done estate tax returns.
I do. Yep.
And I usually refer those to people like Joan while I do the probate, but nonetheless I have some familiarity with it. There's a federal, and in Oregon there's a state level estate tax. In the federal level, the current amount is $5 million. And if you're husband and wife, if you have a smart attorney or even a half smart attorney, like me, you can actually hire them and they can make sure that you utilize both husband and wife's level. So in federal level, for instance, it could be $10 million that wouldn't even be subject to an inheritance tax or an estate tax. At the state level, it starts at 10.
It's $1 million.
Yeah,
it's $1 million.
Right, it starts at $1 million, so you could double that for a husband and wife, and you could maybe even do some other things as well to increase that. So if your estate is worth $1 to $2 million, more than that amount, you might in Oregon have an amount levied on the gross value of your estate, and the tax rate is it 10 to 16?
Yes, it starts at 10% and maxes out at 16%.
Right. So it's not insignificant. I'm not saying it is, but it's, and for some assets, for instance, resource lands, I think they call it, family farms and forestry, the exemption isn't $1 million, it's $7.5 million from what I understand. So if you doubled that, that'd be $15 million. But anyway, it's a tax that's levied at the time of death on the gross value of the deceased's estate. And it's not levied in very many cases. 2 to 3% of the cases, I believe, is where you're going to have an estate tax due.
So part of the issue is this. They want to do away with this tax, which puts in $100 million plus the other money that would be lost to the loophole they have in there into the state treasury, which affects, losing that money will affect everybody because it pays for schooling, pays for state troopers and incarceration at the state level, and for medical expenses of the medical health plan and other such. So it's the kind of thing that everybody is going to be impacted by not having some trooper or school or something. But only 2% or so of the people who die in Oregon every year even have to address this issue, because you only have to worry about this if the value of your assets when you die is $1 million or more. So most people, their estate is, a lot of these people are lucky to get to $500,000. Now, that's not unusual, because especially in the Portland area and Washington County and whatnot, because of real estate. Real estate has really increased. But pretty much, that's why only about 2% of the people that die in Oregon end up paying it. Most people don't have $1 million of assets when they die. They either didn't earn that much money, they didn't inherit any other money, or they spent it. And sometimes they're spending it toward the end of their life on assisted living and health care and such as that, which is what they are supposed to be able to do with it.
Then why are those people wanting to do away with the inheritance tax? What's their reason?
It's...
Well, you should probably ask them that. I don't want to defend their position necessarily. I think what they would say
yes, what would they say?
Is that they've been paying taxes on this property their entire life, either in the form of real estate taxes or income taxes, or you remember this is the gross value of this estate. So if you buy a piece of property for $500,000 and it goes up to $1 million, the tax man still says it's $1 million. And they go, geez, we've already paid, taxes on that $500,000. Why should we, assess the whole amount? And I'm not saying that's not a valid argument. Okay, there is some truth to that, and that's why Joan and I may have a slightly different take on what this is, or the fairness issue. My big problem is more what I call the loophole or the Trojan horse, and also a tax rate on this. But anyway, I think what they would say is they've already paid tax on this, they worked hard for this, they have a right to give this to their kids, and a lot of that is true. Whether they should pay tax on it or not is another issue, however, and whether it's fair to pay tax on it is another issue. But I think they would say they've already paid tax on this, and that's the large part. Now, what you have to remember, however, is this. The other part of the way the estate tax works is you get what's called a step up in tax basis. And this is really important, and people have to listen very closely to this, because this is where the issue isn't double taxation, it's no taxation at all on some value and some investment profit here. And that's where the loophole comes in. But I'm not going to get into that right now till we get into that, but just to explain what tax basis is. If I buy a piece of property for $50,000, a home, and I live there for 30 years, and when I pass away, the home is now worth $300,000 or $400,000. When it goes to my kids, as far as the tax people are concerned, they paid $300,000 or $400,000. The tax basis steps up to the current value. And the important thing about this is this. In fact, let's not use a home. That's sort of a bad example, because they may actually end up living in the home. But if I had Apple stock that I bought for $42, and I bought 10,000 shares of Apple stock for $42, and it's worth $400,000, it's now worth $670 or something like that. And so the tax basis on that could step up. When I died, I'd give the stock to my kids. They would have millions of dollars worth of an asset, and when they sold it, they'd pay zero tax. There's no capital gains tax. They had no profit, because as far as the IRS or the State Department of Revenue is concerned, they paid exactly what it was worth at the time they inherited. So if they do that, there's no capital gains tax on any of that profit. However, if that stock was worth $200-300 million, well, it's $2 million or $3 million in Oregon, at least they would be paying an inheritance tax on that. They would still gain the advantage of having the step up in tax basis, but at least we would be getting some taxation revenue on that profit. And that's an important consideration. I've asked people quite a lot. I said, what if we got rid of the estate tax, but we also got rid of the step up in tax basis? Would you go for that? And I've had mixed reactions to that. Because I said, if you're trying to avoid double taxation, that seems fair. We should tax it at least once, right? And some people are okay with that, and other people kind of scratch their heads and wonder why I would even bring that up. But it's a tax fairness issue.
So then, you said it's recurring. You addressed it here in Oregon before, and it didn't pass.
Sometime in the early part of this century, 2002 or 3, I believe.
Oh, long.
And yes, it did not pass. We fended off the repeal of it before. We need to fend off the repeal of it again. And it's rather silly that in this time when people are so desperate, money is tight and governments don't have much money, and everybody is talking about how wealthy the wealthy keep getting, that suddenly we have this on the plate. It's kind of an interesting, and I don't know what to make of it, timing issue on their part, that they thought this would be flying in the face of, at a time when, we've had Occupy marching in the streets carrying on about the 2% versus the 98%. I think it's partly to get conservatives to come to the polls in this election year. And when we have a big presidential election too, I think that is part of the reason it's there.
Go ahead.
Let me briefly, because I sort of missed this other issue as to what a defender of Measure 87 would say. And this, I don't know if this psychologically it tends to make sense. I don't know if the statistics would back this up, but they'll say that because Washington doesn't have an estate tax and other surrounding states don't have estate taxes, it encourages people who have some assets, the folks with more than $2 million, to move out of Oregon before they pass away. And therefore we lose the benefit of having people like that who generally do donate their time to communities, and they do make generous donations to charities, and they do invest in other businesses. And by imposing this tax only in Oregon, not in Washington or some other states, it encourages, or at least makes those people think maybe I should move to Vancouver, where I was born, or Seattle, or some other location. Arizona, Nevada is a typical one that they quite often speak of. So, and how many people actually move out so they save a few tens of thousands of dollars on their taxes? I don't know the answer. I think your gut tells you there may be some. Statistics indicate there's not that many, however. So that would be another defense. And the other thing I would say, and maybe this is where just to let you know, I'm not like we need to tax the rich and get all the money out of here. I think it's possible that this estate tax number could or should be modified, but I'd only do it in the context of an entire restructuring of our tax system to make sure that we don't just move this one down and then we have nothing to replace it, that we have to have something that's going to be fair, ultimately promote economic growth, promote good jobs. I think by piecemealing stuff like this, it doesn't do us any good in Oregon. If ultimately we want to get to a fair system that's fair on everybody, that's somewhat progressive, that encourages economic development, that encourages jobs, this is simply not the way to do it.
A fair tax system, are you pie in the sky, a dreamer, or what?
Yes. You know, every time I say that, people say you're dreaming, and the answer is, well, so what's wrong with that? You know, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with trying to make the system as good as it can be?
Because if you don't imagine that in the first place, you can't get to it because you haven't even conceived of the concept.
You have
yet.
no path. All you're doing is nitpicking at this stuff. And I think people who become very cynical do that. I think if you're very cynical about the way the system works, and it's fair to be cynical in many cases, but if you're not willing to put the time and effort into it, then things like this come up. It benefits me. Therefore, I'm for it, without looking at it this more of a holistic way. Does that sound very progressive, Joan?
Yes.
Yeah, it sort of does, I guess.
I think we need to look at a concept. What do taxes pay for? And in all this argument about taxes, people forget what it pays for, because I know that the people behind the measure, a lot of the people cheering it on are, they hate public employees. They carry on about the PERS program and how much money these retirees are going to get. It's beyond that. We live in a culture that has a lot of public assets. We know about roads, we know about parks, but also our education system, our court system, our system of governance itself. These are also assets that our culture has. And somebody has to pay for them. The people that have to pay for them is all of us. Mm-hmm. And we all chip in as we can toward this via the tax system. And there are people who don't earn enough money to pay any taxes. That's part of what certain presidential candidates have talked about. But they're not talking about the fact that these people don't earn enough money to warrant paying any taxes. That's why they're not paying the taxes. Most people pay some tax at federal and state level. And that money may or may not go to what they themselves would choose to spend it on, but what it is, the assets that we are paying for benefit all of us. Public schools benefit all of us. Roadways, waterways, public parks, all of that benefits some of us. And I have friends that would say that having police forces is not a really big benefit, but it is if you're the one that's a victim of a crime or stuck on the highway, or you're the person who's suddenly lost on the river or up in the mountains, or your friend is, those are the people that come and find those people. There's various people from various police entities throughout the state. And so we need to be paying for this stuff. We need to not be carrying on about, I could spend that money better. Well, maybe, maybe not. I mean, I personally couldn't pay for a police officer or a court system, but by all of us chipping into the pot, little by little, we have enough money to do it. Or at least we're trying to have enough money.
I've read or heard that some other countries, other societies, are not so anti-tax as Americans are. Have you
They're
heard
not.
that?
I have read that.
Why do you suppose that is?
They're probably getting a better benefit from what they're paying for. Mm-hmm. Now, we are all sitting here talking about taxes at the state level being paid to the Oregon Department of Revenue right now. Mm-hmm. You know, the states and the cities and the counties are really hurting because the federal government, which we pay money to and then it ships some of the money back in, has spent many years of tax money on war for 2 wars, and it's bankrupting the country. And what is happening is that money's not coming back to the states and the counties and cities, and so we are feeling the pinch harder and harder. So when the state may lose direct money that it's getting, it's going to make it even harder on the people who live here. As I said earlier, the general fund, which is where the estate tax money goes, is largely spent on education. K through 12, I understand. All throughout the state. This $100,000 that we would lose every year from the estate tax being taken away pays for a week of schooling. And we are a state that has some of the, we've already been in trouble for having some of the shortest school years. And we also have some of the highest, we're ranked pretty high in large class sizes. We've been cutting schooling like crazy. When I went to public school, where I did go to public school, we had art, we had music, we had PE twice a day. Much as we didn't like it, we still had it. You know, they don't have that here in public school anymore. They have art and music once a week, 30 minutes. You know, I had those two switch off, so I had them at least 4 times, each of those at least 4 times a week.
So education would suffer if they
Deeply.
didn't have that tax money available to them.
Exactly. And it would come out of education because most of that money goes to that.
Yes.
And maybe at some point we need to get to the loophole Trojan horse that we
Please
talked
do.
Good
about.
time.
If you want me to, I can cover that now.
Please.
So if you look at this, and I made a copy of the measure that was drafted, and first of all, it defines what it calls a death tax. So it's codifies for the first time death tax, I guess, at least in the state of Oregon. It says that a death tax, which it phases out over time, is any tax imposed on an estate of any decedent, someone who died, or any inheritance tax, or any tax imposed on the transfer of property to any person where the transfer is a result of death of a person. So there are some transfers that may occur automatically. They want to avoid taxes on those. And then 4D is the important part. So it defines a death tax as any tax imposed on the transfer of property from one family member to another family member. It's limited to children and grandchildren, but to a child or a grandchild, where the family relationship between the transfer is within the 3rd degree of sanguinity. Consanguinity, that's a legal term. It means a child or a grandchild, basically. And that's the transfer of any property interest therein. Property includes real estate, personal property, so gold, intangible property, so Apple stock, IBM stock, rights in a contract. So any property that's transferred, if you transfer it to a child, there shall be no tax on it. Well, they've just redefined a capital gains tax to be called a death tax. So here's how it's going to work. And if a client came in, this is what I do. The guy with the Apple stock, let's make it more realistic. Let's say he bought 1,000 shares of Apple stock, and he paid $42, and he paid $42,000 for 1,000 shares of Apple stock. It's now worth $665,000. So Dad says, hey, you know, I'd really like to get this. I want to build something nice for myself, or I want to do something nice. But if I sold it, I'd have to pay federal capital gains tax at a 15% tax rate, and I'd have to pay state capital gains tax rate at probably 9%.
9%.
Probably 9% tax rate. So he says, you know what, son, I've been meaning to do you a favor here, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to sell you the stock for what it's worth, $665,000. So I don't have that money. Don't worry. We'll do it on an IOU. Here's your IOU. You sign it. You give it to me. Okay, Dad, I'm not sure when I can pay you back. Don't worry about it. But I'd like it paid back in 30 days. He goes, okay. Son gets it. There's no tax, so he pays his federal tax rate of 15% on that. He doesn't pay the 9% of $665,000, which would be about $55,000, $60,000, which would normally go to the state of Oregon to support things like school, police, jails, and various things. Then son says, well, I think I got to sell this because I owe the money to Dad. Goes to the broker, says, I need to sell this stock. How much? $665,000. Goes, great, I'll sell it for $665,000. I pay that money to Dad. He has the same money if he'd sold it directly, but he's washed it through son. Son has no taxes. If you buy something for $665,000 and you sell it for $665,000, you have zero profit, zero gain. You only get taxed on your gain. There's no gain, no taxes on the son. So by using this statute, you could do it with real estate, you could do it with a business, you could do it with gold bars, you could do it with a Van Gogh painting, you could do it with anything, big or small. By washing it, now you would have to incur the capital gains, but if it's something you're going to sell anyway, why not wash it through your child? Is there any reason not to? There may be. Now, there is some case law that indicates if you do a transaction solely for the purposes for tax avoidance, you may have to pay the tax. So I'm not saying it would be that grossly obvious, but it doesn't have to be. You could structure deals that appear to be somewhat okay, and I believe I believe Oregon is going to lose a significant amount of capital gains tax on real income, real profit that's never been taxed by sticking in subsection 4D. This is the Trojan horse. Now, I don't know whether that was done on purpose or they just didn't understand it. I could see them saying, the drafters, when I say they, so I could see them coming to the conclusion that, you know, we did this because as part of an estate plan, sometimes we want to sell the business to son, but dad wants the income from it, so this is a way of doing it, so they sell it early. So son gets control of the business or daughter gets control of the business early. And because that's part of an overall estate plan, we think it should be, you know, not taxed. Mm-hmm. They could do the same thing by gifting it to the son, by the way. They could still do it. And they wouldn't incur the federal capital gains tax that way either, by the way. But they'd lose the step up in tax basis, which is an important factor. And they would have to, at the end, maybe pay some estate tax. This, and as you can tell by Joan and I talking, we're probably not necessarily voting for all the same people, okay? Mm-hmm. I'm probably more centrist than she is. I believe that the Oregon estate tax maybe should be modified or lowered as part of an overall tax restructuring. But I'm telling you, if you believe like that and you're a moderate, go to your state legislature, ask them to change it down in Salem in an overall discussion and negotiation on spending and tax structure. Do not vote for Measure 84. This is not good for any of us.
So what's going to happen in November? What's going to be the result of that voting?
I haven't seen any polling on it. I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know if anyone's done any polling on this.
It's hard to say.
If it passes, I'm going to start advertising for estate planning.
Mm-hmm. One thing I want to say about this, the loophole that Robert just described, you don't have to die to use this.
Right.
The death tax, as they call it, they call it that because it happens because somebody has died, and now their property is going to be examined and perhaps taxed. But this Section 4 part can be used now to pass property through. So they're actually they've rigged it to get the benefit of the step up in basis that we attempted to explain earlier, where the people who inherit the property get the value at date of death, and if they sell it right away, they don't have any gain. So they want to get that. They want to keep that benefit, but not actually have to pay or even go through the estate tax process. And like I said, this can happen now.
Yeah, we used to not have a death tax in Oregon. It wasn't called the death tax. Now we have something called the death tax, but you don't have to die to use it.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know whether this was an oversight on the drafters' part or whether they really knew what was going on here, or whether
they planned it to.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to get the benefit of what happens if somebody does die and you get the step up in basis without the actual cost of having to pay any estate tax or even go through the process, which does cost some money from somebody like Robert or me to walk you through the process, to do some planning ahead of time or not.
I'm going to get it either way. I'm going to either help them with the loophole.
But it's this part alone can cost us $300 or $400 or $500 million every year, and it can start right away.
The idea of taxes are just so horrendous for the American people until any sort of, when you mention the word tax, no, I'm not for that. But I don't know what it's going to take in our in our society here for us to generally acknowledge that taxes are necessary and useful and worthwhile, but because of social responsibility and other similar reasons. And I wonder where that mindset came from. Is it because of monopoly capitalism, the idea that my possessions and my worth depends on how successful I am in life, and my success depends on how much wealth and power I have. And if I've got a little more money or wealth than you have, then by definition I'm more okay than you are. It's a whole mindset, I think, that has been built up in our society, and the selfishness of Americans as compared to the Danes, for example, and many European nations. And their arrangement is such that they pay high taxes, and I understand by and large they're satisfied with paying high taxes because they recognize there's a social responsibility.
Well, and they get, particularly in Denmark, which you mentioned the Danes, health care and retirement saving. You know, they have a bit of a retirement program when they retire. I mean, they get something back out of paying.
And then
we don't feel that we do.
What about their income as compared to ours, the average American versus the average Dane, and
I don't know.
The split is huge as a whole. I forget the numbers. I shouldn't even try to talk about it. The CEO makes 300 times what his secretary makes in income on a yearly basis. Yeah, on a yearly basis. And there's something horribly wrong with that. Somehow or other, America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, we've lost our sense of social responsibility. There's other influences that are having us have the kind of attitude that we have, where we're fighting this kind of a thing where it seems the humane, loving, kind thing to do.
One thing I'm concerned about with if we lose the inheritance tax, which is now how it's known as, officially it's an inheritance tax, they're going to have to replace this money with something, and what they're probably going to replace this with isn't move toward a sales tax.
I knew you were going to say that.
And a sales tax is a truly regressive tax. I mean, it depends on how it's structured, but anybody, because I lived in California and I lived in Texas where both of those have a sales tax. If I bought this binder, I would pay a sales tax on it if I bought it in those two states. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter how much money I am worth, I would pay the same rate depending on as the next person. That's why that's a regressive tax. Poor people don't get a benefit, a break on paying sales tax. So that's one thing people that are having to think about this should consider, that something's going to happen. If Measure 84 is passed, something's going to happen to replace that money in the Treasury.
Okay, we're running out of time, so let us make some closing thought or comment to our viewers that would be useful for them to hear. You want to go first, Joan? Look
Sure.
at the camera and tell them your final message.
Okay. In November, vote no on Measure 84. Keep the estate tax, keep funding for schools, and be on the lookout for this kind of thing in the future. And if you want to get involved, you can contact Tax Fairness Oregon at the website on the screen. And we are happy to have people help us with this. Thank you.
And how about you, sir?
Thanks, Don. Measure 84 is just fatally flawed. Even if you believe that we should look at the estate tax and modify it, really modifying it in the scheme of an overall tax structure is a better way to do it. But even if you think you should do it individually, Measure 84 is not the vehicle to do this with. You can tell Joan and I aren't compatriots all the way, although I think we do have a lot of similarities because we're both members of the Independent Party. But it's just fatally flawed. You don't know what we're going to be getting. This is a very poor way to make tax policy in Oregon, is to have a small group of people who have a financial incentive to pass this and have hidden something in there. And if they stuck something in there, like subsection 4D, you don't know how this is going to be applied. this is just a bad idea. It's a bad law. If they want to come back in 2 years and do another initiative taking out that section, maybe then consider it. This is just fatally flawed.
All right, thank you for your comments, and it looks like it's time for us to shut down. So keep your pens and pencils handy, because you may want to jot down something we'll show you in the closing credits. But I want to tell you about a few PSA, public service announcements. First, I want to tell you about getting my local broadcast schedule. Go to my website, www.donbaham.com, and click on present day activities. Next PSA, to watch my shows on the web, go to www.donbaham.com, click on favorite links. I've got many shows, all sorts of guests on there, so go there and watch some earlier shows. Next, learn more about the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. I've been a member for centuries. Go to www.aclu.org. And our civil liberties are in jeopardy now, even with the present administration. Next, to get my shows broadcast by other stations where you're watching this, you ask your local public access station to go to www.pegmedia.org and tell them that you want to do this, and they'll tell you how to do it, and you can have my shows broadcast at the local cap. Okay. To end corporate personhood, go to www.movetoamend.org. We got to end corporate personhood and take our country back for the ordinary citizenry. Do we have anything more? I got to thank you for watching the show. And remember, KFC. Yes? Not that KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken. Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable. To you too. And you too. And you too.
And you too.
And you too. And thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as we did. Good night.